And we're live. That was actually quick tonight. It usually takes a few seconds longer. But hey guys, welcome to Whiskey, Wine, and Writing. I am your host, Natasha.
And I'm your other host, Nikki. And tonight we have a great guest. We have an Amazon best-selling fantasy author, Nat Russo. Say hi.
Hello.
And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I'll give you the short version. So I've been writing most of my life. But I do have a day job. I'm a software engineer in my day job, and every spare moment that I have, I'm sitting in front of the keyboard writing stories. So
That's awesome. So if we have a problem with our computer, we know who to go to? Is that what you're
yes.
telling us? Okay, awesome. So Nat's book, Necromancer Awakening, is available on Amazon for $2.99 right now. Be sure to go over there and buy it. And it has been on, I think, 5 different Amazon bestseller lists. Is that right?
Yes,
Five-ish?
it has been. And it managed to make it crawl its way up to #1 in the UK last year for a few weeks. So that was exciting.
That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, yeah, so I think I had it up and I probably lost it, but so we are actually going to be talking tonight about self-publishing because Nat did make the decision, and I remember him going back and forth on this for quite a while before he made the decision because I've been following Nat on Twitter for quite a while. And he was going back and forth weighing the pros and cons and going, you know, which is right for me. So tell us a little bit about why you ultimately decided that self-publishing was something you wanted to do.
That was like you mentioned. That was kind of a long and difficult decision process. I was convinced for the longest period of time that I'd finish the book and I would start querying agents and publishers and go that route, and then turn around and start writing a different story. But what it really came down to for me was how I define success personally, and I found that I wasn't very comfortable in placing my success in somebody else's hands, and that was just a very personal decision for me, and so it was really about wanting to kind of succeed or fail on my own terms, and knowing that it was because of something that I did or didn't do, rather than because it either wasn't published because market conditions couldn't sustain it, or some other business reason. So really, it came down to my definition of success, and once I realized that part of what was leading me towards traditional publishing was this desire to have some type of a seal of approval from a higher authority, I realized I might be going in the wrong direction. And so I started doing as much research as I could, and trying to weigh the pros and cons. And at least during the period of time that I published Necromancer Awakening, back in that was 2014. It was last year. So the early part of last year, pretty much everything was leaning towards self-publishing, from the right from the notion of being in control of the whole process. Including hiring a cover artist and hiring an editor, and all of that stuff. The notion of being in control of all that really kind of set me on fire, and I got excited about that. Whereas when I stopped and thought about just sending query letters out and maybe getting published, maybe not getting published, that didn't excite me as much. So. It was, really after spending months of weighing the pros and cons, I finally came down firmly on the side of self-publishing for Necromancer Awakening. And I have to say, it didn't take long to have a lot of my suspicions borne out in terms of, at least, on one side of things, the financial side of things. It was definitely kind of upheld what I had suspected going into it. It was a little bit more profitable to go the self-publishing route.
Okay, so guys, if you are just joining us, we do have Nat Russo with us. He is the Amazon bestselling author of Necromancer Awakening. He is a self-published author, and that's what we're talking about tonight, is self-publishing, among other things, of course, because you know how we are. If you have any questions for Nat or for us, you can either join us on the Google Hangout. You can go to whiskeyblindwriting.com, click on Nat's post. You can either watch us via YouTube or Google Hangouts. Google Hangouts, you can ask questions live, or if you don't want to do that, just go to Twitter and use our hashtag WWWriting, and we're more than happy to answer your questions on air, anything you may want to know about self-publishing. That's why we have Nat here. Obviously, he knows what he's doing. Like we said, Amazon bestselling author. So we're going to try to debunk some myths you may have, answer any questions you may have, and all that wonderful stuff. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, be sure to give us a thumbs up. I'm starting to go with that. I am. So,
I have a question for you, Nat. So you mentioned doing all this research to help you make your decision. How important would you say the research process is for this kind of decision, and how would someone who's just now looking into self-publishing, how should someone go about that process and starting it?
I think that the research process is crucial. The decision to self-publish or go the traditional route is as close as we get to a religious war, I think, in publishing. And these days it's really a hot topic. And so what it really boils down to is making a very personal research, and to try to find out what it is that you want to get out of publishing and what you want to get out of your writing career, and see which direction actually gets you there. And so definitely do as much research as possible. I'm the type of person that just devours as many books as I possibly can on the subject, and so that's exactly what I did, and I definitely don't regret it. The research really was an eye-opening experience for me, and had I gone into it blind without the research, even if that meant self-publishing without the research, I might be sitting here questioning my decision right now, as opposed to just getting on with my writing career and writing the next story.
So besides Arendor Press, which by the way is Nat's website, what other websites would you suggest people go to start their self-publishing research?
Well, so I think for one, you do well to follow Joe Conrath and his blog. J.A. Conrath, I believe it's jaconrath.blogspot.com, but I'd have to verify that. But Joe Conrath is a pioneer really in self-publishing, and he periodically, a couple of times a month, writes a blog article about the self-publishing world and what's going on, current events, and that sort of thing. So in terms of websites, I definitely recommend Joe's blog. There's also there's a blog out there called The Kill Zone, which is actually hosted by several best-selling authors. It's not specifically about self-publishing. It's more about the craft of writing, but they also touch on the subject of publishing from time to time. And it's very even-handed how they cover the topic of self-publishing versus traditional publishing. So it's worth taking a look at. And other than that, I would have to recommend highly looking at books written by David Gowron. He has a series called Let's Get Digital, and that was the information he presented in that book was one of the things that kind of pushed me over the edge and said, yeah, I really need to go the self-publishing route.
That's awesome. See, so research really, really pays off. I mean, for me, I also looked at both, and I was like, oh my God, it's so much work if you're doing it all yourself. Like you said, you're marketing yourself, you're picking out covers, you have to deal with editors. I mean, well, you deal with editors going traditional too, but it's so much more this is why I have respect for self-publishing, and I mean this for people who do it right. Because there are some people who sadly don't do it right, and I feel that's what gives self-publishing a bad name.
Yes.
Because some people just kind of finish a first draft and throw their book up, and everybody's like, oh, well, self-publishing means you can't hack it traditionally, and I don't think that's true at all. I think that there are some phenomenal self-published books out there. One of my CP partners, E.L. Wicker, just self-published her first book, Fractured Immoral, and I love it. I mean, when you do it right, I think self-publishing is a great avenue, and I have so much respect for people who do it because it's so much work.
It is definitely a second full-time job for me, without a doubt.
Speaking of all the work, at any point have you ever gotten overwhelmed, or like how do you deal with all that? Because it's a second full-time job, like you said. That must be a lot of work.
Yes, yeah, it is, and I have gotten overwhelmed, and I found that, strangely enough, I wish I had this luxury in my day job. I don't, unfortunately, but for writing, I found that when I do go through those times of feeling overwhelmed, sometimes I literally just need to step away for a while. Just back away from the keyboard. It could be for minutes, it could be for hours. I've actually stepped away from writing for 2 or 3 months at one point in time, just to really kind of clear my head and to come back to the project with a clear head and without having all of the stress of the things that I was worried about and that kind of stuff hanging over me. Wait, am I trying to say that I'm an escapist or something? I don't know. Maybe I escape from my problems. Is that what it is?
Well, technically,
no, but
think about it. Wouldn't all authors or writers in general be escapists? Because we're escaping into new worlds when we write, and then we run away from those new worlds when we need a break from writing. So
that's exactly right.
So, I mean, because I think that anybody who writes, when they're writing in this world, they get immersed within this world. And I think for people just starting out, that's why it's so hard for them to edit and maybe chop a lot of stuff away or have to redo something, because they have been immersed in this world and they want it just how they picture it.
Exactly. I think there's a tendency with many new up-and-coming writers who don't have much experience to treat every word that they've written during the first draft process as if it were sacrosanct. And they approach editing almost with fear. Will it change my story if I take this sentence out? Will it alter the characterization? And so there are a lot of these worries that new writers have. And of course the answer is it absolutely will change the story. It absolutely will change, the little things that you're worried about. But it invariably, in my experience, it invariably changes it for the better when you have a goal in mind for your editing. When you've taken the time to identify problems, then you can actually sit down and say, okay, I know that my characterization is a little off in this scene. I kind of broke character a little bit with my protagonist or something like that, and so I need to go back and rework this scene. Having a target, I think, is crucial, because editing, you could dive into editing and change the world, and in reality, a lot of your first draft was really, really good. The heart of your story is there, but you do need to polish it. You kind of need to file the rough edges off and make it shine.
One of my biggest problems is starting in the wrong spot. I always, forever and always, start chapter 1 in the wrong spot. I will redo my chapter 1 so many times on my work in progress now. I already told Nikki, I was like, so did I tell you I already rewrote the first chapter? She's like, already? Because I haven't finished it, but it was like, I got an idea, and I knew it would make the story better, but that required literally rewriting everything I already had.
Right.
Crap. Oh, here we go. So see, and here's the thing, guys, don't ever throw out anything you cut or change.
Oh, yeah.
No file for it. Put it off to the side, because
Absolutely.
You may decide either you want something from it, or you may decide maybe that is the better version. You don't know, but don't get rid of anything ever.
That's very true. In fact, with Necromancer Awakening, I ended the first draft of Necromancer Awakening at 180,000 words, and this was at a time when I was planning on publishing traditionally, and some very close writer friends told me, you will never get this published if you submit a manuscript more than 120,000 for fantasy. So I was terrified, and I had to, I spent about a year and a half cutting it down to under 120,000 words, and then wound up deciding to self-publish. So that was kind of a strange set of circumstances. But yeah, you know, a lot of people that have read Necromancer Awakening might not be aware that I actually wrote a prologue to Necromancer Awakening before publishing. And the first draft contains a prologue, and it starts off with, it's essentially the same scene as the final scene in the book, and it worked almost like bookmarks. And I just I really beat myself you know, over the head for weeks, just trying to decide, do I leave this in, do I take it out, do I leave it in, do I take it out? Finally, I just cut the whole thing off, started it at where, you know, where chapter 1 is now, and it just kind of, it worked a lot better. And
that's been a very common question lately that I've seen, anyway, is people asking to prologue or not to prologue.
Ah, yes. There are good prologues, and there are very, very bad prologues. And that's usually how they exist. They're either good or they're very, very bad, you know, one or the other. And the bad ones are where the writer believes that the reader needs an enormous amount of upfront backstory to understand the story to come. And,
I've seen that quite a bit too.
Yeah, and it's almost never true. If you put an interesting character on stage and have them doing interesting things, the reader will follow that interesting person through the story and be perfectly willing to put some of their confusion on hold, because they know that, okay, I'm in the hands of a good writer, and the writer is going to give me these little bits of information as they're needed, and they're not going to overwhelm me with information that I somehow have to remember, you know, to go through the story. So yeah, I would say that if you're writing a prologue and your purpose is because you don't think the reader will understand the story if you start at chapter 1, you might want to rethink that and rethink how you're actually handling some of that exposition.
Awesome. We actually got some questions.
So sorry about the dogs.
Oh, that's all right.
Our first question is from Emily Dunn at Newfangled Wife. She said, did you find self-publishing cost you up front? One of the fears of self-publishing for some could be investment/money. Right.
That's a common question that I get about self-publishing.
Uh-oh. Did he freeze?
I think your dog scared him away. I'm just kidding.
It's quite possible. I have no idea why they're barking right now, but I assume Brian's going to be on top of that, and so we're just filling time.
After all,
wait, Nat, you're back. Hold on.
Sorry, you froze for a second.
Oh, did I? Okay. Am I still frozen?
You're back.
You're coming back.
All right.
All right, so answer the question
again.
We'll recap the question, and that is basically, did self-publishing cost up front because some of the fears people have is the investment or the money? And now Nat is going to answer.
Yes. So the very short answer to that question is yes, it did cost a little bit up front. Because, you know, as the self-publisher, you're taking all of the risks, so that is a little bit scary, you know, and you don't have a publisher out there hiring the artist and all that other stuff. So yes, it did cost up front, but I will say that it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to self-publish and still produce quality work. The two largest expenses that a writer will face going into self-publishing is hiring an editor, for starters, and then hiring an artist to do the cover. Those are probably the two largest expenses. And many writers will cringe when I say this, and I know that this is a little bit controversial, but I will say, and there's some experience out there to back me up on this, particularly with Hugh Howey, the writer of Wool. I will say that if your funds are extremely limited, you don't have to necessarily hire a professional editor for $1,000 or more to get that first work of yours edited. If you have a really good circle of knowledgeable beta readers who are also themselves writers, you can make that work to your favor and have that serve as your editing process, as long as you yourself have also managed to increase your skill, your command of the language, your command of the basics of the craft. If you can do all of that, you can at least for your first book, you can put that $1,000 plus cost aside and not have to worry about that.
I think that's where critique partners come in too. The people that, not just beta readers, but critique partners who will line by line it, because beta readers are generally more of the overall, your characterization, are there plot holes, are there this, are there that. Having critique partners, I think, especially as a self-publisher, is essential to getting those line by lines. You know, sometimes I've found that I will write a word, like I might be going for think, but I spelled thing. Well, my spell check isn't going to catch that.
Exactly.
He will, but my spell check.
That's correct. And you won't catch it yourself too, because your mind will automatically fill in the blanks, because you know what you were trying to say, and your eyes will just jump right over all of those little errors, and you'll never see them. So it's absolutely crucial. And by the time Necromancer Awakening hit the digital shelves, I would estimate between 30 and 40 people had read that book cover to cover and offered me feedback and critique. A healthy amount of those numbers were line by line edits, like you're suggesting, with people identifying typos and grammar issues that wherever they cropped up. So yeah, absolutely, it creates more work. There's no doubt about it. It's a lot of work, and there aren't any shortcuts. But then, for a person who's doing this seriously and who's really serious about the craft of writing, the amount of work really, it really doesn't matter too much, because, for me, as much as I say that this is a lot of work and it's a second full-time job, that's certainly true in terms of hours. But it's also where my passion is. So it doesn't feel like I'm, now, the one thing I will say that I will advise to never, ever, ever skimp on in any way, shape, or form is the cover of your book. I would advise writers that if you're being honest with yourself, whether or not you have really good Photoshop skills, whether or not you're an artist or a designer, if you're being honest with yourself. And if the answer is no, I'm not, in any way, shape, or form, please do yourself a favor and spend the money to hire an artist to illustrate your book. I can tell you from I've hired 2 artists to do 2 covers for me, one for Necromancer Awakening and other for the prequel short story called The Road to Dar Rodan, and I've never spent more than $250 on a cover. And that's for custom art. That's for a piece of art that no one else can use. It's mine exclusively. So it's not like buying stock images or something like that and compositing them together. I have absolute certainty that my cover, unless it's used illegally, my cover will never pop up anywhere else. So I definitely recommend going to a professional cover designer. And if you're gonna pull back money to put it somewhere else, put it into the cover. That's because the other stuff you can do, you can really do for free, but you can't really do the cover for free. I mean, maybe you have a designer friend or something like that who's willing, but it's worth the money.
It's very true what you said about authors asking themselves whether or not they're designers. My minor was in a lot of design stuff, but I am not a designer by any means. And one time,
oh, don't lie. She's the one who does all the ads. She does every ad for our show.
Okay, but see, that's basic design. That's not cover art. So, 3 years ago, when I wrote my first book for NaNoWriMo, I saw you could upload a cover, and I thought, wow, this is fun. So I made this great cover with stock art that I photoshopped together, and this design girl who's bluntly honest in my office, she's an actual graphic designer, walks in and goes, someone should take Photoshop away from you. Like, okay, maybe I won't do this.
Oh wow! Yeah, I'm terrible at it too. I've played around with Photoshop, and none of my graphic designs have come out at anything. I had a friend who's really into that. I keep telling her she needs to go to school and like make this a career. She's really, really good with Photoshop. She was the one who always did like my mock cover art for stuff I did for NaNoWriMo and things like that. So it's great.
My skills are very limited with Photoshop for the most part. I'm okay with small projects like maybe a logo or something like that. But I actually took a stab at the cover for Necromancer Awakening a year and a half or so ago, and I shared it with a couple of friends, and one of them basically told me, Nat, this looks like iStock photo threw up all over your book.
Oh my god.
And at that moment, I was like, okay, I'm hiring a designer.
That's awesome. We do have some more questions for you. The next one's from L. Evans at Runaway Tale. I've seen some horror stories about people getting ripped off by self-published. Is there anywhere to check out publishers?
Oh, that's a good question. I've only recently become acquainted with, and I haven't actually checked it out myself yet, but I hear of a service called Writers Beware, or Writer Beware.
Writer Beware has been around for a long time, but I think, are you talking about small publishers? Because I think Self-Pub and...
I think they're talking about things like CreateSpace and Lulu and things like that.
So one of the things I will say is that if you do it yourself entirely and eliminate the middleman, so to speak, with the exception of Amazon, obviously there's going to have to be some middle tier, whether it's Smashwords or Amazon or whatever your publisher of choice is. Those they're very reputable services. You're not going to get ripped off by CreateSpace or Amazon. You know, these guys are... Their entire business model is in making you succeed as a writer, because the more copies of your book that you sell, the more money Amazon has. So if you're making money, Amazon's making money, and everybody's happy. Where you might need to be concerned is if you're approached by a publisher who says, I can publish your book if you pay me a certain amount of money. That is where you definitely need to be careful, because
those are vanity publishers.
Exactly. Those are vanity publishers, and what I tell writers is when it comes to the relationship between the writer and the publisher, work should always flow from the writer to the publisher, but money should always flow from the publisher to the writer, never the opposite direction.
Awesome. We're getting a bunch of questions all of a sudden.
We are.
So everyone bear with us as we ask your questions. Feel free to keep on.
Ian Mitchell's has been up on the sidebar. Do you have the sidebar open?
Yes, I do. And it is, but, you know, come into the Hangout like Ian Mitchell has done and ask us a question here, or tweet us at WWWriting, and we will see you on the hashtag. Ian's question is, so what tipped the scales between shopping the book and self-publishing? Which we touched on a little bit earlier, but would you go take that one away again?
Sure. So what really tipped the scales, one of the many, I don't know that I could identify a single point that was the tipping point, but one of the ones that definitely comes to mind is that, and this will sound strange, but nobody knows how to sell a book. Nobody knows how to do that. It's black magic. Nobody knows really how to market these things. And but what we do know for a fact is that word of mouth sells books. But it takes time for word of mouth to become a thing. And time is something that in most traditional contracts you simply don't have. Because if you do get a contract and a bookstore agrees to buy X number of copies from the publisher, if you don't come out of the gate with an impressive track record of sales, you're only going to get 30 days, maybe 45 days if you're lucky. And if your track record doesn't improve, the bookstore is simply going to package your book up and send it back to the publisher for a full refund. So, and the reality is that it could take months, it could take more than a year for your story to really find its audience and to pick up and start going. You very much have to be in it.
Uh-oh, he froze again.
I think he was going to say you have to be in it for the long haul, but we'll wait for him to come back to clarify that point.
Not a problem. He is frozen. So while we're doing that, hi everybody who's watching, who's just joining us or been along for the whole thing. If you want to learn more about Nat while we're waiting for him
long haul when it comes to writing.
Wait. You froze again. What I was saying is, if you want to find out more about Nat while he's unfreezing, so we're letting him catch up, you can go to arendorpress.com, and he'll be right back. We already had this discussion that if it gets messy, he needs to drop out and come back in. You can also follow him on Twitter at Nat Russo, and his book, Necromancer Awakening, is on Amazon for $2.99. Go buy it. It's a fantastic novel, and Nat, like I said, has been on 4, I thought it was 5, but I only see 4 bestsellers, but even so, oh my god.
That's fantastic. And he's also being like the guru on the mountain tonight on self-publishing, and we're learning so much. So make sure that you ask your questions, and he is now back to answer the one.
I'm back.
Yay!
So you were correct. I don't know where that sentence froze, but yes, I was going to say you need to be in it for the long haul.
Awesome. Yes, win for me.
All right, so next question, I think, Nikki, is from PD.
It's from PD Pats, and it says, does Nat have any other marketing tips besides Twitter, Facebook, Goodreads, Tumblr, call local paper / TV, book sign at a local bookstore?
Well, in regards to that, I mean, when you self-publish, how hard is it to get a physical copy of your book, to get out there?
It's not very hard at all, particularly if you're going through CreateSpace, which is owned by Amazon. That's my go-to service. Although I have to say I will be experimenting with a service called Ingram Spark for Book 2, because I understand you can make hardcovers with them. So I'm going to play around with that. But for CreateSpace, it's very simple. Once you upload your manuscript and it's approved, and by approved, that simply means it fits the constraints, and Amazon is pretty certain that when they cut the book to the size that you've selected, it's not going to cut anything off or anything like that. So once it's approved, you can actually order author copies at a greatly reduced rate than what retail would be.
So does that go into what she was asking about, calling the local papers and the TV and the books?
Yeah, absolutely. I typically have 15 to 20 copies on hand at any given time, so that if some opportunity does come up, I can just throw a box of books in my trunk and go out to whatever location I need to be. I think the key with marketing, and I know everybody has heard this saying already, but I'll repeat it. There's the old saying that 50% of marketing works, we just don't know which 50%.
That's a good motto. I like that.
I've definitely found that to be true. The key, I believe, is going to be in finding your audience. First, knowing your audience. That's really crucial. Know who your audience is. That way, you can know where your audience hangs out. Where do they live? Do they use Facebook or Twitter? Do they go to gaming conventions? Do they go to Comic Cons? Where is your audience? And once you can answer that question, marketing becomes a lot easier. Now, I say that as if I have some type of insider secret, but the truth is I'm still trying to figure that out myself. It's not as easy as it sounds. I mean, it's easy in concept, but it's very tricky to actually pull off.
That's awesome. So E.L. Wicker, she's saying thank you to you. You were one of the first writers to follow her when she started out. E.L. Wicker is my critique partner that I told you about, who just self-published her book. And she goes, can we take a moment to talk about the hashtag bad write tip? Because it's so funny, and I have seen these, and these are amazing.
Where have I been?
Follow the hashtag bad write tip. Nat does like this whole thing, because a lot of Nat's tweets are, and I think that's something probably to touch on too for self-pub, having your tweets scheduled. Because a lot of his, I know, are scheduled, but his bad write tips, oh god, they're hurt.
That sounds awesome.
Well, I started off, back in 2012, I knew absolutely nothing whatsoever about Twitter. And I kind of plunged into it feet first, and I thought, okay, what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to start sharing just general writing tips. And what a lot of people might not be aware of is I kind of did it selfishly at first, because every time I would learn something new about the craft, I'd create a little bite-sized, tweet-sized chunk, and I'd put it in my queue of tweets more as a personal reminder than anything else, because I think I had like 20 followers or something like that at the time, and so people weren't exactly beating down the doors of Twitter to find my profile and stuff. But after a while, it started getting a little bit dry, for lack of better words. And I thought, okay, people, let's inject a little bit of humor here, because there are serious writing tips all over the place, and we know where to find them for the most part. So let's play around a little bit, and do stuff like, well, of course you know better than your editor. Don't ever listen to your editor. Little things like that, which are hopefully, meant to be obvious. I threw one out there about the Shatner comma, something about you should place a comma every 2 to 3 words tops, and I called it the Shatner comma, and that was one of the first ones that went out, I think. And the funny thing about these horrible write tips is how many people take them seriously, and it never fails. About 9 a.m.
bad in the hashtag.
About 9 a.m. Central Time every morning, I have another horrible write tip that goes out, and usually within about 5 minutes, I get a flood of angry responses from people that think, how can you say this? How can you put this out there? You're horrible. How are you selling any books? You don't know what you're talking about.
I probably shouldn't be laughing, but I am, because it says right in the hashtag, bad.
It does.
Bad. Okay, that's the opposite of a good write tip. We're going with bad write tip.
And depending, if I'm feeling a little mischievous, I'll actually go along with it, as if I'm deadly serious. But for every reply, I'm bad this way. For every reply, even my replies will have the hashtag horrible write tip. And I'm hoping that, by the umpteenth reply, the person gets it, that this is a joke. Nobody could possibly be serious about this, But you'd be surprised how many people don't get the joke. And I've lost count of how many times somebody has rage quit my profile, because they just don't want anything to do with me. I've been blocked by people. I've had conversations spawned about people should never follow Nat Russo because he doesn't know what he's talking about, and it's funny. And I get a kick out of it, and the people that have followed me for a while on Twitter get a kick out of it. And I've actually written some blog articles that I call hashtag blindness, and I collect these angry tweets, and I never reveal anybody's identity in these articles. I wouldn't do that. But I collect these angry tweets, and I put them together periodically into an article series that I've written called hashtag blindness. And you'd have to check that out. Some of the responses are just priceless.
Oh, Twitter. Twitter is a magical place where dreams go to die.
A magical place and angry tweets. We had mentioned we were going to talk about this before the show. Let's talk about Clean Reader. Shall we take a moment to touch on that, people? So, if you guys have been around Twitter last week, there was a huge flow with this Clean Reader app. Now, what it was, it's an app that goes in and I think their slogan is something like, read books, not profanity. And they would take the books and they would sell the books, and you would be able to cover up profanity words, and it would replace it with something else. But it took into account no context, no nothing. For instance, vagina became bottom, and I think Chuck Wendig mentioned this one. Breastfeeding became chest feeding, which is just really kind of creepy if you think about it. But anyways, but the problem was that basically they were taking these books and they were selling them and they were making a profit off of it. It's not like somebody was buying your book and then making notes in the margin or making highlights and notes in their e-reader. they were, in a sense, kind of taking your book and redistributing a censored version of it. Even though they say this is not what it was, if you're covering up words and you're replacing them, that's pretty much what you're doing. Or am I wrong in that? Does anybody disagree with that?
I agree wholeheartedly. In fact, this is a timely subject because I think just 2 days ago I went off on a couple of angry rants on Facebook, which is rare for me, but I did it because I just something about this just bothered me on a fundamental level. I can understand people not wanting to read certain types of material or view certain types of material. That's everybody's right. I would certainly make those decisions for my own son, him being underage. But I do have a problem with the notion of censorship in general. And it really bothered me that I could spend 4 years on a book selecting every word and every nuance with painstaking care and attention to detail, and then an app that, some algorithm, and I'm a software engineer. I write algorithms. I wouldn't want a computer deciding what is art and what isn't, and so that really kind of bothered me. But like you said, the real crux of the matter was they were distributing these books for a profit. And for writers like myself who are part of the KDP Select program, that is not good at all, because we have exclusivity agreements with Amazon, and if they ever find our books available digitally in any other forum, we could get ejected from the program, and that would be pretty lousy.
Yeah, we were even talking that there were some books that were no longer available and that shouldn't have been available that were being sold. For instance, I know Emmy Mears had her book out on the Clean Reader app, and it should not have been available at all for sale. So something very shady, at least to me, was going on here. I don't think this was wholly thought through, and somebody mentioned to me that they were like, well, maybe they thought vagina was, it was for a sex scene. And I'm like, but nobody uses the word vagina in a sex scene. This is a...
I hope not.
Right, it's a generally used as a scientific anatomical portion of the body. So to me, it's like you're taking physical parts of the body and saying that it's bad for people to say this word, or they should be ashamed that it's called this, and I don't think that's right.
Now, I grew up in a very sheltered world, but I have such a big problem with people wanting to censor art and change art. If you have a problem with it, do not read it. That's a simple option instead of changing it. If you really think you should change the words in something, you probably shouldn't be reading it anyway.
Right. It never, we've all seen those horrible adaptations of movies that make it to television. And they have all of the profanity censored out or modified. A great example of this, one of mine and my wife's favorite movies is The Breakfast Club. And it never fails. When that comes on television and it's edited, it's almost unwatchable.
No, anything that comes on television that's edited is unwatchable. We spoke about this. We have profanity or, implications of bad things happening or whatever in our works for a reason, because it makes a story. And it's like, how many words of my novel do you take out or do you change? How are you still saying that's my novel? That's not my novel anymore, because you're completely changing context. You're completely changing everything by changing out words. It might not seem like a big deal to you, as a reader, but to the author, that is a big deal, because that's not what I was trying to say. And you're changing what I was trying to say in my story.
Exactly, and I also think that it's kind of misguided in terms of sheltering kids, and we were chatting before the broadcast that I had just come back from a week-long trip chaperoning a high school band across the country. I'm here in Austin, Texas, and the trip was to Indianapolis and Chicago. So I spent a lot of time with these kids, and I can tell you right now that I actually learned some words. So I think the stuff that I write is tame compared to what I was hearing on that school bus.
Yeah, but again, I think that would be something you would want to talk to your kids about and educate them about profanity and about terrible things in the world instead of, kind of trying to shield them from it, because then when they encounter this situation in the real world on their own, they're not going to have a foot to stand on. They're not going to know how to deal with it because everything was censored for them.
Exactly. In my own parenting, and I know that's a personal decision for everyone, but with my son, we've had conversations, with him. He's turning 15, by the way, and for him, it's for us and him, I should say, it's not necessarily about the use of profanity in general. It's about recognizing what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. Because I know a lot of people would disagree with me, but there are places where certain levels of profanity are appropriate, depending on the circle of people that you're with.
But I was telling Nat this before the show. I grew up with an Italian mother and a redneck father. I'm sorry. I grew up with profanity. I grew up with nothing being censored, whether TV, books, people around me. Nothing was censored for me.
Right.
So, but if I was curious about it or I didn't like it, they would talk to me about it and explain the situation. Like, I knew my parents could curse. If I cursed, oh no, it was another story. Like, no.
Right.
It was like, don't do as I do as I say.
Right. And I actually, that's something I tell my son all the time. Every once in a while, he'll let something loose, and I'll give him a look, and he knows that. And he says, well, why? You swear and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, the difference is what's appropriate and what's inappropriate. I'm a 44-year-old man who you overheard talking to some of my friends who are roughly the same age. You're a 14-year-old student who, needs to understand that talking like that, speaking like that around your parents is inappropriate and disrespectful, and so it gives the opportunity for those conversations. And I'm the type of person who I don't believe that there is really any such thing as a bad word. Every word that we have in our vocabulary is used to evoke some type of an image or some type of an emotional response. And there are a lot of people who will not like the fact that I'm saying this, but there are occasions where very few words will evoke the emotion and image that you're going for than a profane word will. And but as writers, those are decisions that we make very carefully. We don't just let these things fly out of our mouth. We make those decisions based on characterization and based on story and setting and tone and emotion. And so it's a craft. These language decisions are very much part of the craft, and they're calculated. And so to have an automated process come in after the fact and just change all of those decisions out from under you is just horrible.
It's terrifying.
Now, we have a little more than 10 minutes before the show ends. I can't believe this hour went by so fast. And
Wow.
we have
notice time. And we do have
tons
some
of
questions, I know.
for you still. So let's do the lightning round of questions.
All right.
Because we have some good ones on the hashtag.
Okay.
First one is from Neskata at PagonaOrb on Twitter. In hindsight, what secret can you share about self-publishing on how to make your brain baby pay for itself right out the gate?
Without a doubt, the work that you do before publishing in terms of building your writer's platform is what's going to sell your books right out of the gate. So if there's any one activity that you can spend time on right now before publishing, it's building your platform.
I think that goes for self-publishing or traditional publishing. Having a platform is essential.
Absolutely.
So there's actually also one on, they did the @ to us instead of the hashtag, and this is from M.A. Frechette. Sorry if I said that wrong. She goes, do you need any business knowledge for your novel to do well in self-publishing?
I'm a software engineer with a degree in philosophy. So my business knowledge was pretty much non-existent going into this, and I did pretty well the first year. So you don't really have to sweat that too much. Now, that being said, please recognize that what you are doing as a self-publisher is starting a business. So you do need to treat it like a business with the seriousness that it deserves. But in terms of specific business principles and stuff like that, you're not really opening a brick and mortar store. You're not dealing with crazy logistics, getting products from point A to point B. So a lot of that stuff is kind of removed from your table by virtue of publishing through a service like Amazon or CreateSpace or Smashwords. But as long as you have, what I would say is, rather than studying business, maybe study a little bit of marketing and on how to reach audiences and that kind of thing. I think you get more bang for the buck that way.
Awesome. We have another one from PD Past, and she says, has Nat used different self-publishing programs? If yes, does he prefer one over the other? Easier to format, to upload?
So I guess I'm going to make an assumption here and say that we're talking about writing programs, like different word processors and stuff like that, only because I heard the word formatting mentioned. But I'll address both real quick. I use a program called Scribner for my writing.
I need to do a show on that because Scribner is love.
Oh, Scribner is phenomenal, and if you're going to start taking your writing seriously, you owe it to yourself to check out Scribner. They have a great 30-day free trial. I'm not affiliated with Scrivener in any way, by the way.
No, neither am I, but I love Scrivener and I love Scapple. I love their mind mapping program. It's amazing.
Now, in terms of services for uploading, I'm pretty much exclusive through Amazon. In fact, no, there's no pretty much about it. I'm absolutely exclusive through Amazon right now. My ebooks are uploaded through Kindle Direct Publishing, and my paperback is uploaded through CreateSpace. Each of those has their own challenge, but I will give you this tip. Do a Google search for Guido Henkel, Henkel, and you're looking for his formatting guide. That is my Bible for digital formatting.
But if I recall, Scribner usually has also a pre-format, like if you want to export it as an EPUB or whatever, it has an option for you to do that as well.
You absolutely can, and I would say that in 90% of all cases, if not 95%, that's going to be absolutely adequate to do what you need it to do. For those one-off cases where there's something very special you're looking to do, like perhaps having section break images or something of that nature, then digging into the actual HTML a little bit is very handy.
Awesome. P. Paps asked a couple more questions. Actually, before I ask hers, because she asked some really great ones, but Tasha, are there any more on our account that...
Hold on. There was... I just have to find it. Ask another one while I find it.
Okay, sure. So we'll do that one because we want to make sure we get all your questions because we care about you guys. She says, this has probably been asked, well, that one has been asked already. Did Nat go digital only or perhaps just at first? Has he done paperbacks? If so, is there a huge expense difference? What are the risks?
So I did both simultaneously, both digital and paperback, and I will say there are no risks whatsoever if you go through a service like CreateSpace. There's no charge to upload to CreateSpace, and they handle all of the distribution for you. You can make changes very easily and have new editions printed. And the distribution, they distribute through Amazon, so you have the strength of Amazon's distribution network at your fingertips there. I mentioned briefly, I think that for book 2, I'm going to be experimenting with a service called Pilgrim Star. I don't know yet how that's going to work out, and I do know that there is a small upfront fee to create an account through Ingram. But I'm also told that the benefits are a lot better. Like I mentioned, you can create hardbacks as opposed to just sticking with paperbacks. But in general, generally speaking, there's no risk whatsoever and no cost to creating your paperback.
Awesome. So
I'm
I have
not
to
seeing
say,
sorry.
sorry. I think there's a little bit of feedback again, but as we're coming up on the hour, I just have to thank you again because we have learned so much tonight on self-publishing. I had looked into this before. I think every author, when you're making that big decision for traditional and self-publishing, you do a lot of research and you wonder, and this is just so eye-opening and great to hear. So thank you so much for sharing your insight with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's been amazing. And again, arendorpress.com, you can find more about Nat. His Twitter is at Nat Russo. And, of course, Necromancer Awakening is available on Amazon for $2.99. See, if you've been smart and you knew about Nat, you could have got it when it was free. That's what I did, because he had that little promo going on. It was free. But, and I believe he said if you have read Necromancer Awakening, that we're hoping the second one is out by...
Yes, so it should be out, I would say, no later than late summer.
So if you are a fan of Nat and Necromancer Awakening, hopefully by late summer you will have number 2 in the series. So it's just more to put on the bestseller list. We already know this is going to happen. So
we got a last-minute question based off something you had said, and it was that tool that you mentioned. How do you spell it again? Because people are wanting to search for it right now.
Oh, are you talking about Scribner?
Scribner is that
Yeah, I feel like she might have meant you were saying Google something.
Oh yes. So it's a name of a person, Guido, Guido, last name Henkel, Henkel, and he has published a formatting guide that is wonderful. It's actually a 9 or 10 part blog series, but don't let that put you off. It's actually it actually reads very quickly. The first 3 parts or so are basically introduction. But I came away from that series with what amounts to a Google Doc of a step-by-step process that I can repeat for absolutely everything that I publish.
Also, if you were looking for Scribner, you go to literatureandlatte.com. Maybe Nikki and I will try to get one of the people from there on the show to talk about it.
Someone was wondering if we could get a technician on to do live screen shares on their most questioned problems.
For Scribner?
Yes.
Oh, I will try to get in touch with them and see if we can get somebody to do that, and maybe Nat can help us figure out how to do that on screen through Hangouts, since he's the software engineer. So, and we'll just have everybody on to work this out. So, Nat, since we are coming up to the end of the hour, is there anything we didn't touch on, anything you would just like to say to everybody, or, to wrap it up, anything we missed, didn't touch on?
No, I think the only other thing that I'd like to put out there is I also have in the works, as well as the Necromancer series that I'm writing, I have in the works a satire that I'm going to be putting together over the next 1.5 to 2 years. And
wait, is this about the bad right
kind
tips
of
again? No,
going to be covering new ground. So a little scary, but hopefully we'll work out. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
I think it's amazing that you're doing multiple genres. I do the same thing, so it works out.
Oh, awesome.
Nobody has to be stuck to just one genre.
Exactly.
Just, writing's all about exploring, breaking boundaries, and creating wonderful stories. So write what you love.
Right.
So, all right. So, Nikki, anything you want to say to wrap yourself up?
Just want to say, if you take one thing away from the show tonight, guys, I would say make sure you research, and as part of your research, watch the show again. So many great things that you possibly could not absorb it in your head in 1 hour. I will probably watch it again just to reminisce and absorb the tips. You can also, read more about Nat on our site and find out more information about him at whiskeyWineWriting.com. Make sure you check out his book. And, yeah, what about you, Tasha? What do you want to say?
To go off of Nikki, feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All you got to do is go to YouTube, look up Whiskey Wine Writing, or click on the link from the video on our website right now. It'll take you right to YouTube, and you can click on our page. And then go ahead and subscribe. You can also, if you like this episode, give us a good old thumbs up, which you can do from, again, our website or YouTube itself. Nat is really, really great about talking back to people on Twitter. That is how I met him. And how we started talking, and I just thought he would be amazing for this because I've seen his entire journey from the time he was debating on which way he wanted to go, and he's really good about documenting that. I'm pretty sure he has a post about why he chose self-publishing if you go really, really far back on his blog.
Yep,
So,
I sure do.
So again, that's Arendor Press. And be sure to say hi to him, buy his book, and, you know, I'm sure if you have any more questions, just tweet to him and he'll be happy to answer because he's an amazing guru when it comes to all this.
Thank you very much. And yeah, absolutely. Any questions whatsoever, please feel free to direct them to me.
Awesome. And Nat, it's been so great having you. Thank you so much for being here. Guys, we are signing off for the night. You have a wildly creative week, and we will see you next Monday.
Have a good night.